Welcome on professionals to episode 47, our PODSWAP with Lesson Impossible.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. I recently joined as a member, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with the advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
And please put unprofessional development in the How Did You Hear About Podgo? That will give us a little finder's fee. Thank you.
Hello, unprofessionals. So as you know, now we're doing real commercials, not just the silly ones that we normally do. So today I've got with me my daughter Micah. Say hello, Micah.
Hi.
She has an Etsy account. It's called what?
Roo Makes Bracelets.
Roo Makes Bracelets, okay? We'll put a link in the show notes for you for sure. So she makes some friendship bracelets. She even has one that is kind of an unprofessional bracelet where she's made the unpro letters in the bracelet. So if you need a bracelet, go to Roo's Bracelets. Anything else you want to say about your bracelets?
No.
Okay. But she's a little kid. She's 11 years old. She's entrepreneuring. You know, support her. And go to Roo's Bracelets. Click the link in the show notes. Thank you. Say goodbye, Micah.
Bye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an exciting episode of Unprofessional Development. I'm Tedisco.
And I'm Mealy. So we've got Aviva, Levin. She's a fellow edu-podcaster, as I believe is the correct term. Or educaster, possibly. I have no idea. But edu-podder. But
You sound like I go to Hogwarts and teach.
Thank you. Yes.
She casts education. That's an educaster.
And does she? Okay.
Yes, that's magical spells.
All right. So, just to kind of get us started, why don't you kind of like walk us through like your little 2-minute bio of like how you got into the world of education and what you've done and what you do now and all that kind of stuff.
So I got into the world of education, according to my parents, from the very beginning. I cleaned out my parents' attic recently and I found a Marx book for all of my stuffed animals.
Oh, wow.
And it would be like Teddy, absent.
Nice.
So I was clearly destined for the classroom.
Do you have educators in your family to know even to do that? Or you just learn that from being in school? Your mom? Okay.
My mom was an adult educator.
Okay.
But I didn't have any like kid educators, but I was definitely a teacher's pet, if you will. So okay. I closely monitored the teacher and their the way that they did their job, I guess.
Okay.
And then so I was a teacher in British Columbia for 10 years, teaching social studies and French. And then when I moved to the States and wasn't able to work, I really wanted to find something that was going to keep me in the realm of education, make me a better teacher when I got back into the classroom.
Okay, I'm going to pause this for a second again. So Justin Trudeau had you on like his hit list and you had to leave his terrible regime and flee to the freedom of America? Is that what happened? How did you end up here?
Well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Okay.
So... But the cover story is that my husband's an aeronautical engineer.
Oh, wow.
And that Seattle is where the jobs are.
Yeah, that's where Boeing is, huh? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, sorry. Back now to our regularly scheduled program.
So I was on somebody's podcast and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? And I was like, no, but now I have. And 13 months later, here we are. And I've very much enjoyed it and feel like it's, especially with the pandemic, a way to have virtual friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And have we mentioned the name of her podcast yet? Did we say Lesson Impossible yet? Let's say Lesson Impossible a few times. Lesson Impossible. Lesson Impossible.
Lesson
Yeah,
Impossible.
so If you want to know,
when you say a word so many times it loses meaning, that's called semantic satiation.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes. Leçon impossible. I don't know. Less impossible. All right, so let's stop that.
It's a great podcast, and you've been doing it since like September, right?
Since
Last
2019, September 2019.
So you just it had its first year. It had its birthday recently.
Yes.
And its 50th episode.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so I know on your podcast you like to ask people the big hypothetical question, and we like to do it too. But here's how we like to phrase it. So if you got a magic wand, and you could add and or delete one thing from the entire Eduverse in order to fix it all, what would it be?
I would decouple time with learning. This idea that if you sit in a chair for 80 minutes, you are now 80 minutes more educated than you were before. And I think we're seeing this especially with COVID, this idea that kids were sitting in school for 7 hours a day. We thought, okay, that's a perfect amount. Now they need to sit in front of a computer for 7 hours a day because they need those 7 hours of education. And that's really not the way that we learn. And it makes a lot of assumptions about the speed that kids learn, their engagement, all this kind of stuff. So I think that if we could get rid of this idea of time being the measure of education and more about whether you want to call them standards or goals, and really look at that. And I think you can take it further and even say that, like, why do we keep kids in time-based grades? Like, you've been around this world for 13 rotations, so you were in the 8th grade. Like, that in itself, I think, is something that we could rethink, but that's way down the road. But for now, I just think this idea of how many hours or minutes a kid is in school shouldn't be the metric for how we measure how educated they are.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, because I mean, as a middle schooler, I've definitely taught kids where I'm like, you're reading at a 12th grade level, and what am I going to do here exactly? And then also at that, I've also taught at schools. Like, I grew up at a school that had sort of what was the standard schedule, where I had 8 or 9 classes each day. But I've taught at schools that have block scheduling, where every class, you have like 4 classes, they're all like an hour and a half. And the philosophy is, it's like you can teach twice as much. But in reality, I mean, you're still teaching the exact same amount. It's now just drawn out to an hour and a half, and I'm spending more time doing classroom management.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I'm definitely for that. I would love, and I know there's the whole Montessori model, and I guess that's kind of like that. And I don't know a ton about that, but my biggest, like, I've thought about that a lot too, like, because we get these kids, at least in our area, I don't know how common this is. I'm guessing I assume it's relatively common that in our area that the minimum you can fail in middle school is 1 time, or the maximum you can fail, is 1 time. So middle school, where we are, is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So if you fail 6th grade, and I don't even know how that works in elementary school, but if you fail 6th grade, and then you're going to have to repeat 6th grade. But you won't have to repeat 6th grade a second time. So if you didn't learn it the second time either, nobody cares. You're on to 7th grade. And then if you didn't learn anything there, because honestly you're in a 7th grade class and you only have a 5th grade education and you're struggling and you couldn't learn that either, who cares again? Move you on to 8th grade. Okay, here comes 8th grade, and now you're really confused because 8th grade stuff's way more complicated than the 5th grade stuff that you can barely handle. Maybe you couldn't even handle that. And now here you are in high school. Now we're going to put you in high school. You can't barely read. You can't barely write. You have no mathematical skills. And now we're going to throw algebra at you and all this other kind of stuff. And what a shock. You start skipping class, getting in fights, doing drugs, like generally just causing trouble because you're in this room where everyone is like making you feel like insignificant and you can't struggle it. And then you got the other kid like Tedisco's talking where like, oh my goodness, how come every year, the first half of the year is just telling me stuff I already learned last year and the year before. Like, I know this. Can you please tell me something new? I only learn like 3 new things a year, and I'm so bored. And you have like both kids sitting in the exact same classroom, and some of the teachers supposed to
differentiate.
And
the whole idea is that it's a social promotion. You don't want to keep kids from their peers, but it's fixing the problem within the bad system, right? If we took away this idea that you're only supposed to socialize with kids that have been born within 12 months of you, then we wouldn't have this issue. We would have perhaps classes based on where you're at and where you need to be. And then at lunch, maybe you're friends with a kid that's younger than you or older than you, but you have common interests. I mean, as a teacher, I had friends that were decades older than me, but we had the same teaching philosophy. And I wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry, we weren't born in the same decade, so can't hang out with you.
The cutoff.
And so I'm going to play opposite of that a little bit, but I think some of the reason social promotion is kind of that fear is that I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and I don't want some 16-year-old boy that can only read on a 5th grade level trying to get inside my 12-year-old daughter's pants, for lack of a better term. And let's send him up there and have him getting hang out with the 14-year-old girls, because I don't need that. Or I don't want him beating up my 45-pound 7th grade boy because he's twice as smart as this person here also. So I don't know how we handle that as well. But I do think there should be some flexibility, but at some point sometimes there can be some kind of emotional maturity that varies as well. So I don't know I don't claim to have an answer.
It's an interesting point though.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I do like that.
We divide kids now just by emotional maturity.
We try
the new grade band.
That would be fun because when I was young, I was pretty mature. It obviously didn't stick, but
I would still be in elementary school. Yes.
Yeah. But
farts.
But most of my friends, when I was in school, were older than I was. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And nowadays, whenever I hear hall duty, I can't not giggle. So, I don't know what happened.
Okay, so you taught 10 years, you said, right? So I'm sure there's some crazy things that have happened inside your classroom. Tell us a funny story from the classroom.
Well, this one will go to Disco's duty heart.
Okay.
So
never been described that way before.
So I taught social studies, and I especially loved teaching, my jam is Middle Ages through the Reformation. That's what I love teaching. And so I was at the front of the class, and the lesson was about Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the doors of the church. And this was just a transformative moment. It might be apocryphal. He might not have done it, but the fact that the story went around, that this is a moment in history. Mm-hmm. And so a kid raises his hand and he's like, so he just walked up and put them on the door. And I was like, yeah, I mean, there was precedents. People had done stuff like this before. So he wasn't the first person to do this. And then his hand goes back up and he's like, and so he just nailed them. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they didn't have a lot of different technologies back then. So nails were probably the best. And he's like, and people were inspired by this. And I was like, well, yeah, there was 95 and, that, he wasn't trying to break with the church right then, but, this. And then he puts up his hand again and he's very confused and he goes, but didn't they smell? And I realized he thought that Martin Luther had nailed 95 feces.
Nice.
To the church door.
Wow. That's a whole different visual image. That is really good.
And people were so inspired.
Yes. Yes, the 95 feces. Wow,
he just flung it out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm inspired. Yes, I'd like to.
I wouldn't go back.
You need special nails, obviously, to nail feces to the door. Or do you have to let the feces cure for a little while? I don't know.
Oh, there's a whole process there. Yeah.
Yes.
Honestly, it's a solid metaphor for trying to teach virtually, I think.
Yes. Yes, that's what you're trying to do. Yes. Ah.
Woo! All right. So, Aviva, all right, I do have another question for you. So, I know that teaching is very important to you, very close to your heart, but I also know one of your other big passions is improv, which I think is great because I love improv, and improv has definitely helped me a lot in my personal, professional life. So,
And we're going to improv in a little while. I don't know what we're going to do, but that's what improv is, right?
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Tedisco.
Yes, and. So I guess our question is, so how do you see improv helping you as an educator, and how have you sort of incorporated it or used it in your classroom, either like literally or just like philosophically?
I have incorporated it in my classroom, and it has absolutely transformed my teaching. And it started with my language classroom. So I'm teaching French, and I'm watching the same scene that I probably, the kids in front of the class, they've got a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. I've probably done this in my own French class. Do you have a banana? I have a banana. How much is your banana?
Yes.
And then I'm like, I want to stick a fork in my eye.
Right. What color is your house? Do you have a sister? What is their name? Yes.
And
le table.
And then looking at, especially in BC where I was teaching, when you look at exit data of students leaving language classrooms, they don't feel comfortable communicating in that language. Mm-hmm. And they very much studied the language, but they haven't actually learned to use the language. And I always use the example of it's like being in a science classroom, but never doing a lab. And so I really wanted my kids to be proficient in conversation. And I wanted to not sit in my own classroom and want to stick a fork in my eye because I was so bored. And I really made this connection because I was doing improv out of, in my own free time, that really conversation is improv.
Yes.
You don't know when you're going in what it's going to be. You don't have a dictionary or a piece of paper or guidance. Like sometimes you know what you're going to talk about, but I think you two more than anybody know that you have no idea where you might end up.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
And so why not do improv in the classroom? And what I found was that not only did it make it more fun, but that my students got better at being French students. Mm-hmm. Their confidence went up because rather than having these high pressure instances where conversation just seemed so high stakes, it didn't need to be because we were doing these scenes all the time. And it also solved another problem that I was having, which is that the resources that were available to me to use were really not representative of my students. Mm-hmm. I can't speak for all language classes, but most French novels for students involve, and this is a direct quote from one of the resources I had in my classroom. Sandra was a pretty blonde girl and she was thin, so all the boys liked her.
Yes.
And I was like,
such a tragedy. Oh my goodness, poor Sandra.
And so I was like, how can I
thought her name should be Babette, but anyway, if you keep learning French.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
And so like, how could I get representative resources? And then I realized, well, what if my students were the resources, right? Like if they're doing scenes in front of the class and they're bringing in aspects of their own lives and their own values and their own hobbies, they are literally representing themselves. There's no way I could get a better textbook. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, the other problem that I always worried about was differentiation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do I make it so that everybody is going to be included and feels capable? And especially when I started bringing improv into my social studies classes, when kids were doing scenes, sometimes the kids, for instance, we were an inclusive school. So we had kids that were maybe nonverbal or had, other issues when it came to like auditory or oral processing. Like oftentimes they were really like on the edge. And so we talked a lot about the fact that like, okay, everybody has a place in the scene. So even if you are, the post box that just stands there and says 2 words, that post box is going to be the most integral part of the scene. They're going to be the star. The conclusion could not happen without this post box. So then, the kid that let's say in the wheelchair, you could program their speaking box to say one or two things, and bam, they were the star of the show.
That's cool. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. I could go on this forever.
No, that's cool. Yeah. So in the French class, because I'm just thinking, obviously, I guess how I would do it if I was thinking about it, because I always like to, one of the things I've talked about this before is teaching kids content and teaching them a activity at the same time can be a debacle sometimes. So did you start off improving in English first for them to kind of learn how to improv, or did you go jump right in and we're going to improv French? And I guess part of it is what level of French was it that you were teaching? How many years experience did they have?
So I started with my senior French kids, but as I got more confident, I got it even to my first year French students. We started off saying, you are going to suck. This is going to be painful. It's going to be awful. And as the years went on, I would have the previous semester's kids write notes to the kids for the next year saying, you're going to start, you're going to hate it. It's going to feel weird. And, Ms. Levin is going to be really enthusiastic about it. And it's going to be kind of scary how much she loves this. and her laugh is really off-putting sometimes. So
I get that.
Watch out for that one. So that they knew at the beginning that this is going to be a struggle, and there was no stakes associated to it, right? Like it was very, sometimes in some units I would use improv as an assessment technique, but they knew well ahead of time that was coming. And we only did that once everyone was super comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then I didn't do pure improv, unless kids really wanted to, but a lot of times it would be, you're going out into the hallway for half an hour or 15 minutes. You can't, your phones stay in this bucket that I'm going to watch in the classroom. You can't bring a dictionary, but you can bring like the unit booklet if there's vocab in there that you want to use. And, we'll see you soon. And so I'm doing my master's right now, and my focus is on using improv in the second language classroom. And so a lot of people are like, well, aren't they going to speak English in the hallway? And it's like, they will, but there's actually a lot of studies that show when kids are able to do translingual connections, they can maybe plan a bit in English, but the end product is French. And that's going to be better than if I was forcing them to write out a scene for 25 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing in my class with my English language learners. When I team them up with other kids who know their native language, and they can plan and plot and discuss in their native language first, then I can get better products from them in English because they know what they're doing ahead of time.
Absolutely. And it really values too that the knowledge that they're coming in with. Just because it's not English or French knowledge doesn't mean that it isn't valuable knowledge to have. And then the other thing too is it allowed for like mini lessons. So like kids would come to me and be like, hey, I really want to be able to say this. I know how to say it in English. How do I say it in French? And it might be a grammatical construct that I would never teach to my kids because I'm like, maybe you have to learn this in university, or like, why would I burden you with this thing? But if you really want to learn it, here we go.
Here's present progressive tense.
Yeah. And then, but I'd find the kids, if they learned it once one-on-one, because it was something that they wanted, like it was important that they said something like this. They needed to say it in French. They would keep on using it in their writing and in their speaking because it actually meant something to them versus a lecture and then a worksheet on this obscure grammar that they really didn't care about.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to put this out there and see if this makes sense to you and see if this happens. I'm hoping that it does. So I am, semi-fluent in, Spanish. And one of the things that as I've become semi-fluent that I'm pretty good at is describing the thing when I don't know the word. So I can tell you that it's big and you use it to do this and such, you know what I mean? And then the kid will go, oh, that's called a blah blump. You know what I mean? So does that happen in some of your improv stuff where they're doing it? Where like, oh, I need a, thing to wave, when the parade goes by. And then the other kid who maybe knows it says flag, whatever flag is in French or things like that. Does the improv allow them, I guess, to go around the word and help each other find the word? Does that happen or not really?
Well, absolutely, because that's actually a skill that I teach. We talk about the fact that we don't know everything. Mm-hmm. And so what are skills that we use? And I call it poop French.
Okay.
And it comes from when my husband and I went to France. And what it was exactly what you were talking about. He knew the words for like shoes and houses and stuff like that. So he would be like, if he couldn't say hat, he would be like, the house for your head.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
And so I was like, this is brilliant. So like that was something that we talked about even before the improv scene was mm-hmm. like, and I had read a book actually about someone who was trying to become a hyperpolyglot. So someone who knows like more languages than the human brain should theoretically be able to handle. Mm-hmm. And he said that the thing that he does before learning a language, the first thing he learns are prepositions. So under, over, in, beside, because all you need is a very short list of vocabulary that's mm-hmm. going to be often seen. And if a pen is beside or on or near, boom, you know.
Le table.
Exactement. You just have the word for everything.
Yes.
And if you carry that pen around and put it on top of all these things, boom.
Mm-hmm. Cool. By the way, the only French I know, well, I probably know some other stuff, but the one that I know my fake French. And Tedesco, how many times have you heard me say this? I always say to all the French teachers I meet, I go, "Can you tie my shoes?"
I have heard you say that before. Yes, it's just as painful the second time.
And the way that you say that in German is all feet are the same.
Thank you for not laughing. Please don't encourage him. He will keep making jokes. And now for a word from our sponsors.
Hey guys, this is an advertisement. A commercial if you want to know what it is.
And they do.
So this is especially for you folks in North Kakalaki and South Kakalaki. You have a house, you have a car, you have life. What do you need? You need insurance. You go, you know what? If I could buy my insurance from a former teacher, that's what I'd like to do. Hey, Tedesco, do you know anyone that has a business selling insurance who used to be a teacher?
You know I do, and I think you do too. Pimentel?
Yeah, he used to teach with us, but he doesn't anymore. And apparently there's some guy Garcia that he knows. So they've got insurance. You need insurance. There's a link in the show notes.
You know, we're all kind of looking at bottom line. We're looking at what's going to help us, what's going to be easiest. Check it out. Talk to them. Get a quote, and they will help you out.
And it's at Pimentel, Pimentel, Garcia.com. So you can email them that info. You can go to the website or you can call 704-272-3535. It's all listed in the show notes. Swipe down and click, baby. You're there. And then get your insurance from a teacher, not from some weird lizard or from some ball guy who says ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-da-da. No, you don't want that. You want it from a teacher. That's where you want your insurance.
When you call up Pimentel Garcia Insurance, make sure you tell them you heard it from us. And now, back to the show. All right, so I'm very curious about two things. So number one, a hyperpolyglot?
Yes.
What number of languages does the human brain max out at?
I wish I remembered, but
Double digits?
Yeah. So I think right now neuroscience is saying that there's like, I think it's a little less than 20 that you can like hold at the same time, but you can definitely, the other thing that neuroscience is finding is that your knowledge of language can go dormant, but never leaves you. Mm-hmm. So there's been people, for instance, that are in their 90s and they haven't spoken their maternal tongue since they were in like younger than 10. But when they're re-exposed to it, all of it just
comes back. And people, there's some muscle memory, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can kind of rotate through your many languages and be proficient with them. I don't know what the record is for like proficiency all at once, how many languages. And I mean, it brings up the philosophical argument of like, what is language proficiency? Like if you can get from the grocery store to the movies, that's language proficiency.
Yes.
So really, what are we calling fluency?
Right. And how many languages do you speak?
Just the two.
Okay.
Your story reminded me of a tangent. Another story. So I had some friends who were in Italy, and they did not speak Italian, but they really wanted to see Italy, right? So they were there, and they wanted to get in contact with us, and so they were asking people like, "Hey, how do you get? Where's an internet cafe?" Because they didn't before smartphones, and the people around them like did not understand what they were asking. They're like, "It's just an internet cafe, and you'd like get on the internet and like send a message," and the people just could not comprehend. They're like, "Shoot, we need to get on Facebook." And the Italian people went, "Oh, Facebook!" And gave them, "Oh, the Facebook!" and gave them directions to the internet cafe right away.
Nice. Nice.
Yes.
That's cool. Okay. So I've come up with the case because I wanted Tedisco and Aviva to be surprised. Okay, and then we will pick through, but I want to kind of keep it education based, if that makes sense. So one of us is going to be a teacher, one of us is going to be a student, one of us is going to be a plumber, and since related to the other podcast, we're going to be in outer space. So the classroom is in outer space. So I don't know how do we pick who is which, though. I don't know how that works.
Well, you don't. You just set that out, and then we just start, and you figure it out.
Aviva should be the teacher. You got to teach Mealy something in French.
Oh, we don't. The subject doesn't have to be French, though, either. The subject. Can be
but it is now.
Okay. Oh.
Yes, and Mealy.
Yes.
Well, class, welcome to Français en Espace. Mealy, you are late again.
Oh, I got stuck in the portal thing with my friend.
Your excuses get worse every day.
Yes, the alien ate my homework. I don't know.
That is very possible. Those aliens are constantly eating people, homework, all sorts of things.
Yes.
But while you're apologizing, perhaps as detention, you're going to have to help the space plumber here make sure that our oxygen doesn't run out through the space duct.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, you definitely got a leak here. We're probably looking at.
I just took a leak in the space portal thingy. Yes, I did that.
Not that kind of plumber.
Okay.
We're definitely looking at probably about a week of work. And the bill's going to be a little rough.
Oh.
Well, what if I apprenticed my young student to you? Like some chimney sweep in the Victorian era. Would that somehow lessen the cost?
Yeah, I'm good at the,
all right.
I'm good at the learning.
Yeah, I got a soft spot in my heart for Dickensian urchins. Okay.
Oh. I don't know those words, Mr. Plumber. You're a smart plumber.
Yes. Well, I mean, I got smart enough to land on the moon. So
that's true. I guess we had to pass some kind of go into outer space test to get here.
Yeah, no, I got my master's degree in electrical engineering, and then I took one online course in plumbing.
That's awesome.
Yes, and thank you for listening to my exposition.
Yes.
So, could you pass me? Do you see the wrench over there?
Oh, this thing? Here you go.
Yeah, thanks. That's okay. Now it's floating away. So, why would you just drop the wrench?
Oh, I'm not the smartest helper guy thing. So,
Miss Moon Teacher, can you?
I think he needs to learn the word for sorry because he's gonna be messing up a lot.
Oh,
so
yes.
It's désolé.
Désolé. Désolé. I'm sorry.
Perfect.
I'm sorry. It's my fault.
You apologize about as well as you hand wrenches.
Yes.
Oh no, so much time spent discussing this that the air is gone.
Oh.
And scene.
Thank you.
My
Okay.
last words, I curse Mealy.
Wow. I suck at that. Okay. I need to practice more to disco. Okay.
There is no bad improv.
There is no, well, I mean, as a audience member, there is. But
Yes.
as a performer, there never is.
Yes.
Never.
Speaking of which, by the way, did you ever get to watch it to disco? And Aviva, I hope you've watched it. Have you watched,
Middleditch and Schwartz?
Yes. Have you watched it on
Yes.
Netflix, the long form improv?
No.
It's Ben Schwartz, who you might
From
know
Parks
him.
and Rec.
Yes. And he was Sonic the Hedgehog. And
Just proud of that.
just his improv buddy Middleditch, who I've not seen in anything else. And
I feel
it's
like
just
you might
the
have been
two-
on Saturday Night Live at some point, but I don't know.
and
maybe not.
Yeah. So it's the two of them. They get one story from the audience, they think it through, and then they just do like a 30-minute improv based on whatever the audience has told them.
Yes,
and
it's ridiculously
fantastic.
long. They play like probably 10 characters.
But they keep recalling stuff from like 10 characters ago,
Yeah.
and like they keep messing with each other and trying to get the other one to trip up.
And I don't know how often you guys do this when you do your improv, but they flip-flop characters.
Yeah.
So one person starts off as the plumber, but then the plumber leaves and he comes back at this person, and now to this goes like the student and you're the plumber and all that. Oh my God. And it's just called Middleditch and Schwartz. I think, was there 3?
There's 3 episodes.
Yeah. And they did it like on stage for like an audience of, I don't know, maybe like, looks like 1,000 or so, maybe 500. But, it's really, really good. I would super highly recommend it. Yeah.
I love long form. There's something about like having, it feels like a full, complete character arc and everything. That's just like,
Yes.
it's that's the stew where all those like fun short games, as fun as they are really just like the amuse-bouche of the,
Yeah.
of
I didn't
the
even know
improv
I
dinner.
didn't know it existed, honestly. You know what I mean? Until I saw them do it. But I'm like, oh, that is like, yeah. So, you're studying your master's, I guess. And then once you get your master's, you will be able to teach in the United States, or what do you need to do to be able to teach again in America?
So right now I'm on a H4 visa, which means that I cannot work. Technically, I am qualified to teach in America right now in
So is
Washington.
that like an educational
Student
visa?
visa?
No, it's just a spousal visa,
Oh,
which
okay.
Okay.
is it's always great being referred to in all paperwork as spouse.
Yes. But he's Canadian as well.
Yes. If
Okay.
only I had found
An American.
an American.
Aerospace engineer.
That's the first time any person's ever said that. If only we could find an American.
There we go. So,
But there is hope. When our visa statuses can change, then I'll be back in the classroom, which I'm excited for. Though I have to say, doing volunteering and then especially the podcast, like I really admire you guys for working full time and doing the podcast. Like I know that when I go back to it, there's no way that I'll be able to keep the podcast up. So
no, you will. You'll figure it out. I think you'll have a hard time stopping, honestly. You
that
know?
is true.
Just
It is
make
so
it
much
a
fun.
realistic pace for yourself. That's the key.
Yeah.
Too. You don't want to burn out.
Yeah.
Yeah, during COVID times, I was so stressed and so in need of filling my days where everything had disappeared. I was doing 2 episodes a week. So I think,
Wow.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can-
Don't do that.
I was going to say, you can record for an hour and 10 minutes and, make it a 2-parter. You know what I mean? And say, okay, this is going to be a 2-part. That's what we did with, like, the, 2 Dope Teachers. We did it with Danza. I feel like we did it with somebody else too, but I can't think of another one. Maybe we didn't. I don't know. But,
I like how you throw out Danza. Like we all know
Yes,
Tony Danza.
yes.
Tony, we're on a first name basis.
my last-
It's not a big deal.
I drop his name like a juggler with no thumbs. That's all the time.
Aviva, I do have another question for you. Speaking
cool.
of things that might make it on the podcast.
Yeah.
So you've taught in Canada,
Yep.
Canada, and I know you've in interacting with educators here. Have you spent time in American classrooms, and do you notice any key differences between Canadian and American schools?
Well, from the French perspective, there's a lot less French and more Spanish.
See.
Yes, es la verdad.
I think, honestly, the surprise was just how not different it was. And I don't know if that's because I'm in Washington, which is literally less than like an hour away from where I was teaching.
Mm-hmm.
In talking to teachers, for instance, like one episode I'm thinking of specifically where a teacher was teaching in Natchez, Mississippi, and she was talking about the teaching environment there. That seemed very, very, very different in terms of like, not only just how much they were being paid to teach, but the amount of control the administration had, how little control they had in their classroom. And obviously this teacher eventually left teaching because of that. So I was getting, the horror story of the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, all teachers have more things in the day they want to do than they're able to do.
Mm-hmm.
All kids are fundamentally good and just want to get through the day and want to make a connection with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'd say is that you talked earlier on about when you were talking about time, about like you have like 8 classes a day.
Mm-hmm.
At least in where I was teaching in the districts around me, I'd never done more than 4 classes a day, like 4 80-minute blocks. So having that like rotating where it's like, this is an X block and this is a whatever, like that was new to me. But for all I know, it was in other parts of Canada. And I just was unaware of that.
There's odd schedules in different places. I think I shared this with Tedisco. My middle school had 6 days. So we're only in school, obviously, 5 days a week, but it was either day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, or day 6. So, like, I know we've got, like, class that had, like, A day and B day, and kids and teachers have trouble keeping up with that. I have no idea how we kept up with, like, so you would have, like, a typical schedule. I had a class that I would have days 1, day 3, and day 5, and then another class I would have day 2 and day 4, and then another one that I only had on day 6. So it was like a really niche class that I only had like 1 day out of 6 days, and I would have that class. And like
the one, the brain itch.
Yeah,
it was really, it was so bizarre, you know what I mean? But it just sort of kept going. So there was no like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. Like you just come in and every single morning there was someone that was announcing it. Today is day 2, cause there was no way you can keep track of it, because no one knows what day it is, because, when you have like vacations and weekends and all that kind of stuff. What day was it on Thursday? I don't know. Go ahead.
The school I was at, it was A, B, C, D, and then the next day was D, C, B, A, B, C, D. It just flipped.
Oh, God.
And we had to do Twitter. All it was your day in reverse, and it was the same classes because it was semester system. It was just, and the school Twitter account had to every day say this is an A, B, C, D day or a DCBA day. And I can't imagine middle schoolers figuring out the schedule that you had.
So you're saying, so instead of calling them blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4, you called them D, C, B, and A. So
yes.
You had, which I guess there's value in that, because you get to see your kids now in the morning time, in the afternoon time, and they have different mentality and learning abilities at different times. So that's good. I'm guessing it made lunches confusing and stuff like that as to.
No, because lunch was always at the same time. And like breaks were always at the same time.
But you go to lunch with like your B class instead of your C class, or no?
No, the school I was at. So this is a big thing. Though there are some big schools in British Columbia, but like the biggest school in our district, I think, had like 1,300 kids.
Okay. So
you didn't have lunch shifts, or like everybody was at lunch, and you got to go hang out wherever you wanted to in the school with your friends.
Oh, wow.
So you weren't, obligated to be with a class or anything like that.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with school scheduling is it's too simple. So I'm glad you guys both have experiences with schools and decided to really shake that up.
Yes.
You don't want middle schoolers feeling like they're in control of their lives or they know what's going on.
Yeah.
You really need to make them feel so off kilter they can't even remember where the bathroom is.
Well, we had You know, what Tedesco and I taught, and, you know, they called it enrichment. I think some people call it, like, where they had, was it 40 minutes, I think? And so every day there was a 40-minute block, but it was different every day what block it was associated with. So third and fourth block, you would see them at different times, which I actually liked, but it meant that first block and second block, when it was first block and second block enrichment, was 2 hours long. And
I want there to be a study done on, like, how much the grade drops depending on how much extra talking I have to do to a class. Because, like, right now I have a class where I have a homeroom with them. Yes. So at the beginning of the day, like, I run them through SEL, which means I'm just reading off of slides.
Oh, that's a great way to engage them socially and emotionally.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they're really growing as people. And then I start class, but, like, they're so used to just tuning out my voice. I think that, like, that all of the grades in that class drop, and they can't follow any of my directions.
See, this
and
is where
I really do think it's because they're just oversaturated with the sound of my voice getting tuned down.
See, Tedesco, this is where I'm a rule breaker. If I've got them for homeroom and whatever the block is that comes right after homeroom, here's what we're doing, boys and girls. We're doing my stuff first, and the last 40 minutes that we're together, we're going to do this. I'm going to go through this slide presentation, and whatever we get through or don't get through with that's what it's going to be.
That's pretty smart, actually.
Yeah, feel free to start doing that on Monday, Tedesco.
I feel bad breaking rules. It's not the expectation.
I mean, the only thing that's going to be is if someone gets observed and they walk in and they go, what? Why are you teaching SEL? It's supposed to be like your English class now. And you go, well, we kind of flip-flopped it today. Just today I had a special thing going on, so I flip-flopped it. You know, tomorrow I would never do that again. I'm sorry, Mr. Administrator, Miss Administrator. Yes.
So that's something that's really different, actually, now that you mention it, is the observations.
Okay, cool. Tell us.
So, teaching in BC and British Columbia, teacher autonomy is like the thing.
Nice.
I actually had, when I interviewed.
It's too cold. Go ahead.
It's, I guess, compared to North Carolina, it definitely is.
Very much.
And so in my interview, I was being interviewed by a vice principal, and he gave me a scenario that was like, you teach something in your class, a parent is upset, calls the administrator goes to you, and, you know, what do you do? And so, you know, being little first year teacher Aviva, I was like, well, of course I would consult with my administrator of what they thought was best because of their, you know, extensive experience. And it's always important to take all stakeholders into account. And then
stakeholders. Okay, go ahead.
And then, and the vice principal stopped the interview, and he's like, no, you have teacher autonomy. You say, I have chosen to teach this because it is for the best of my students, and pedagogically it is sound. And thank you very much. Please leave.
Wow.
And so,
nice. I'm just all colors reversed for a minute there. I'm sorry.
There we go.
Wow. Okay. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yes.
And so again, in teaching and social studies, I taught this unit about like Victorian England and the Dixien orphans. And I did, so not so fun fact, in Vancouver, we had a very prolific serial killer, Robert Pickton, who killed a lot of sex workers on the downtown east side. And so I did this.
Oh, it's just a Jack the Ripper spinoff.
Exactly. Yes. So we did a comparison between Jack the Ripper, Pickton, and looking at attitudes towards sex work and women and the value of lives and how policing has changed and all of this stuff. And
what age were the kids, out of curiosity?
The kids would have been 14, 15.
Okay, go ahead.
And a foster parent came in of a kid that I taught to come and talk to me. And I was like, oh no, now is where I have to say, pedagogically, it was sound. And I was like getting really nervous because I'm like, I can't break rules. I can't disappoint people. I'm like that kind of person. And it was actually a really amazing story because this foster parent was telling me that the student, George,
Nice.
whose mom had been in jail because of sex work.
Wow.
Was finally willing to talk about his mom because we'd provided context in class about like social issues and how we value lives and all of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was definitely a feel good story for that. But I think that if I hadn't had my vice principal saying like, you teach what you want to teach, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do a series of lessons on like sex workers in Victorian England and Jack the Ripper.
I wouldn't be that bold.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
so-
it's one of those things too that I think nobody tells you when you're preparing to be a teacher is just those, they give you so much like, here's classroom management skills. And I mean, they weren't great classes, but they were classes. But no one says, here's an administration management class.
No.
This is where you ask for permission instead of forgiveness. This is where you do the opposite.
Right.
This is how you learn to lurk outside the office. And if the secretary looks really pissed off, then you probably should come back later. Like all those things you just have to pick up on your own.
Here's how you deal with a team member who is like completely belligerent and wants everything to go their way or blah, blah, blah. Like all these things that you just have to learn how to navigate.
My most recent interview was with Laura Fitz about restorative justice practices. And she was saying that the only time that a restorative justice session has been cut short because someone stormed out was because a staff member did it. Students stay till the end and sort it out. Staff members get belligerent and leave.
Wow.
Yep, that sounds about right. You know what? I think it'd also be important to teach that skill of knowing like which rules from administration are rules because they will get you fired, and which rules are rules from administration because they need to say that they told you that.
Yes.
Being able to separate those two. Like we got one big warning one year where they were like, make sure that if you have any sort of social media account, that it is not your real name and you're in no way saying who you are and what your school is, and you're in no way communicating with any students or parents in the community. And a bunch of my coworkers are in a huge uproar about this. How is that an expectation? How are they expecting this from us? What are the consequences going to be? And I said, guys, the consequences are nothing. They're not paying anybody to scour through Facebook and find you. Yeah. They're just saying if somebody comes in saying you posted something stupid, that they can say we told them not to do that. Okay? That's just a CYA. That's not a real rule.
Well, which is funny to me that the people that have on their Twitter account, I'm like, that's not really helping you, by the way. That says, all opinions are my own. And I'm like, do you really think you writing that on your Twitter account is going to, like, if you say something that the district is really hot about, that you can just go, well, it says all opinions on my own, so you guys can't be mad about it. Like, no. If they're mad, they're mad. Because if they catch you in that little all opinions on my own thing is not helping at all,
Yes, but all of your own opinions wind up in the classroom, so.
Yeah. It is our opinion. Our opinion is you need to go work somewhere else. That's our opinion. Okie dokie. Well, Aviva, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. Oh, and Aviva is going to be part of EduPodLoza.
Is that going to happen? Is that a real thing?
It's going to happen in June. It really is. I don't know how long it's going to be and what all it's going to look like. That's still kind of very mushy in my head, but part of me wants it to be like 4 hours. Part of me wants it to be like 12 hours. As
an introvert, if we talk for 12 straight hours, I will by the end curl up into a black hole and escape into nothingness.
Well, we'll just have to like rotate in and out and do stuff like that. So I don't know. It just depends on.
Or just do like old Hollywood and like pop a bunch of pills in you like Judy Garland and say, you're on.
Yes.
You got it, Toots.
Yes.
Now dance your heart out.
And you guys are, I think, both younger
Sing into the can.
Both younger than me. Did either of you ever watch the Jerry Lewis telethon? Do you know what that is?
I was born in 86.
Okay.
I feel like Chevy peaked before then.
So Jerry Lewis, comedian, entertainer, whatever.
Oh, yeah. I know who Jerry Lewis is, and I know what a telethon is, so I'm putting together the pieces.
He would host it for 48 or 72 hours. Okay? And he would take short breaks. He would go take a nap for a couple hours, but he was there, like, when you saw him on day 3, he was operating on like 2 days of like less than like 6 hours sleep. And he's like, his tuxedo tie is off and his shirt's unbuttoned, and they would have just various acts. And he's mostly introducing them. And then he's like getting big checks from like big companies. Ed McMahon would like have the tote board and they would go through that. But it was really crazy to watch. So as a teenager, I'm like, oh, let me like watch this all night. So it's like 3 a.m., you know what I mean? And like, and here's Jerry Lewis and here's, I don't know, you know what I mean? At 3 a.m., it's some guy who's like, or girl who isn't, who's like C-list, D-list, who's like, hey, I'll be on the
second ventriloquist on in the row.
Right. Or someone who hasn't been famous in 10 years that still knows Jerry Lewis. And he's like, yeah, come on and spin some plates and have your monkeys on bicycles.
The entire Emancipation Proclamation through kazoo.
Right. Yes. And he was.
Well, I mean, if you want to stay up for 72 hours, I'm cool with popping in every once in a while.
Yeah.
If I stay up for 72 hours, something is horribly wrong.
Yeah, no, I don't know. But 12 hours, I can do 12 hours. I can talk on the mic for 12 hours.
I'm with Tedisco in the introvert camp. That would be
That's fine.
By hour 3, I would just sit here going, and that's it. That would be probably the most I could muster.
But we'll have different themes for different hours.
Okay,
so
I'll Statler and Waldorf. That's what I'll do. I'm just going to stand in the back and just occasionally unmute and throw in a quip and then leave.
I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. It's going to work. Like Tedisco said when he talked about us, like the whole like Tony Danza thing. I am a pit bull with a bone with this. Okay, it is not coming out of my mouth. Like Edupodlooza is happening. It's going to be like now I more want it to be 12 hours than I did 10 minutes ago.
Let's do it. I'm locking it. You know what? If you sign up for 12 hours, I will be there. I will do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, and stay unprofessional.
Thanks for listening, Unprofessionals. For more information about our guest, please check out our show notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And here is a little sample for next week.
Consuming all the time. And so I want to keep doing this. Like, I know so much more about teaching now than I did when I was a teacher, because I'm actually able to go deep on stuff and learn. And when you're teaching, you're just constantly going, which I still feel deeply for teachers that are in the classroom. And so what I try to do now is do that deep work for them so that I can say, look, I read the book. Here are the cliff notes. Here's what you really need to know. Here's what you can take to the classroom and apply tomorrow. That's going to make a difference.
I was going to say, I think one of your strengths when I see your stuff is your ability to encapsulate stuff and to just see, okay, what are the bullet points of this topic or of this thing right there, and just to kind of pull it out and go, okay, here's the things that are going to do. And I know probably part of that is also a little bit of like the marketing strategy, because we all love like 6 things to blah 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 and the 8 best ways that, but you really
number 3 will shock you.
Right. Number 3 will shock you. Well, and that's the thing is, like, I think there are snarky ways of saying that and non-snarky. Like, you could say that, I try to spin things to get more clicks, but if my ultimate goal, because I've got 3 kids in school, if my ultimate goal really is for my own kids' teachers to somehow get this, then I need to make sure that as many teachers get their eyes on this stuff as possible. Exactly. And, one of the things I try to do is, like, I'll interview somebody who wrote a book and I'll say to that person, hey, we'd love if we could sell more books for you. But if we can give them something from your book that they could actually apply now without even having to read the book, even better, something just for free. And then if they really want to go deep, they can go and get your book and learn even more. But I want there to be something in every episode, in every blog post or whatever, that a teacher could be like, that, I'm going to try that and see if it works.
I think this is a good time for us to mention the title of her podcast.
Oh, yes.
Yes. It is The Cult of Pedagogy.
Yes.
The Cult of
Cult of
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy. Yes.
Cult of
I love that
Pedagogy.
title.
Yes, and
Thank
kind of
you.
actually, I know that you got it from and there's a few people I guess still now around who are familiar with Living Color, the
Living
band,
Color.
and the Cult of
Personality.
Yeah.
So, and I personally, if we weren't too busy tailgating outside the Rolling Stones concert on the Steel Wheels tour, I would have seen Living Color live, but
That would have been cool.
but
Wow.
we walked in a little too late to see them.
Yeah.
But that was 1989.
Yeah.
But-
What year did you graduate high school?